All right, let's dig in. Let's start with introductions. If you can tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself. Jan, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jan Weinstein. I work at Publicis Health Media. I'm an EVP of Media Strategy and Client Relationships. Thank you. This is my third MediaPost Brand Insider Summit, Pharma and Health. So three-peat here, hat trick. Thrilled to be here talking about one of my favorite topics that I'm most passionate about, women's health, with my former colleague, Alex.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Davis. It's really exciting to be here, and I'm a big fan of MediaPost. And so my name is Alex Davis. I work at Organon, and it's a women's healthcare company, which is why I joined. I've been very passionate about the space for most of my career. But I work on the US Biosimilars team, so you can ask me what that is after the meeting, and I'll see if I can explain it. And yeah, excited to be here.
All right, so let's kick things off by cutting right into it with what are the misconceptions that you're seeing right now in the broader space around women's health care and overall the conversations that are being had? Jen, can you kick us off?
Sure. Well, misconceptions are rampant. First of all, women's health being just about women and a woman's issue or problem is a huge misconception because women's health affects everyone. Women are often family caregivers. Women suffer from many different conditions that aren't only female body part related. Women's health really does affect our entire population. Another misconception is that women don't want to talk about women's health. And for many, many years, women's health issues have been taboo. They've been swept in the shadows. Women have actually been marginalized because of it, and that's all bad, because women are dealing with a lot of hormonal changes through their lives, from the time they reach puberty to the time they end their reproductive cycle, and it happens constantly. Someone once told me men go through basically 2, and women go through thousands. So it's really, women are hungry for information. They're hungry for community. They're hungry for just being okay with it from the beginning of their reproductive cycle when birth control becomes an issue. I'm only going to say one thing about that. It's unfortunate that this is all politicized, but the key thing here is that women do want the conversation, and it's a misconception that they want to stay silent.
Alex, what would you add?
So I decided I like stats because I'm a strategist at heart, and so because AI is what we're talking about. Where's Keith? Take a shot. I actually asked AI what's going on with women's health. I thought I'd prepare with a little AI, and one of the things I asked about was who are healthcare providers. And according to the Census Bureau, so I did fact check for the journalists in the room, 75% of healthcare professionals are women. I mean, take a minute and just let that sink in. I think historically, our industry, and a lot of times when I'm talking with KOLs, I think historically, 15 years ago, would that have been the same? Women are the ones who take care of us. And I know that's weird, right? Because my husband takes care of my son and everything, but for the most part, women are the ones who are in the front of the office when you go to a doctor's appointment. They're the ones that are taking your vitals, right? And so as marketers, I'm not only thinking about women's health as boobs and vagina diseases, because those are obviously really important, but I'm thinking about the people who actually treat us, and to Jan's point, what are their realities like? And a lot of them are juggling so many things right now. And as a woman who has a 4-year-old and works at a women's healthcare company where our mission is women's health, I often put myself last. And I make all the appointments for my son long before I make my mammogram appointment. And I'm admitting out loud that I put that off, and I shouldn't. I'm at the age where you don't put that off. And so I think that's a reality as marketers when we think about women's health. Also, how do you motivate a woman to actually go and seek help? The other stat that I found really alarming is that women die of heart attacks more than men. And so I asked AI why that is. And one of the reasons is we do live longer, so kudos to us if you're a female in the room. But, so there you go. But there was actually a stat about how that we wait longer, 55 minutes, but we're also the ones to tell our husbands, you need to go to the emergency room. And so women are basically getting their husbands to the emergency room and they're having a cardiac event, but they're dying of heart attacks because they're not telling anyone that they feel tired because the symptoms are different than what has. So let that sink in for a second. That is insane, right? And so as a marketer who realizes those two facts, I think it's really important that we kind of sit back and say, okay, women are treating us, but they're not treating themselves. And what can we do to empower them and give them a voice so that they actually take action so they get the help they need to stay healthy and provide for not only the people they see, but also the families they take care of.
So Alex, I want to dig in further to the advertising and marketer lens to this, right? So what are those barriers that are facing women's healthcare from the marketing perspective? Is it social, cultural barriers that you're looking to overcome? Is it actual written policy within platforms that you're advertising on? What are those hurdles that you need to come over?
Do you want me to go first, Jan? Yeah. Okay, so I worked before, and these are the opinions expressed of me, not of Organon, because I am on the Biosimilars team, so I don't support the Organon brands in women's health. But before Organon, I worked in reproductive health and contraception for an ad agency. And it was during COVID, and women were dropping out of the workforce. And we were like, well, how do we get women to notice us? And one of the things we heard is that women are able to kind of talk the talk, but not walk the walk. Like, it was during the Women's March, but then they were dropping out of the workforce, right? And so that was interesting. And so one of the things we did for the brand that we were working on, and I was a strategist at the time, and was we said, well, what if we became the brand, and what would our meaningful role be? What if we became the brand that allows women to have their cake and eat it too? We literally put that in a brief. And the creatives that are just good at what they do created a world, and it was a vagina. And it was, I want to live in this woman's vagina, on the record. And it was sophisticated, it was witty, and it was like a no BS campaign, right? And we even had men who were clients, and they were like, whoa, wait a minute. Is America really ready to hear the word vagina on national television? And we were like, women are? And so we ran the campaign. And to answer your question, it broke down barriers because women said, thank you, finally. And there were a lot of haters. And I think as marketers, if you don't have any haters, I don't know if you're really actually reaching anyone. Because if it's like working for everyone, it's not working for anyone, in my opinion. And so there were people who were like, I had to explain what a vagina is to my 7-year-old daughter, and we were like, you're welcome. But there were a lot of women who were really like, thank you for seeing me. And the brand did really well. And it's some of the work that I'm most proud of. I have a male boss, and I got to say vagina 3 times in the interview, and he still hired me. So, but yeah, I think that's how you break down barriers. Is you take insights and you listen, and you react, and you have a diverse team. I think that's really important. And then you respond, and you give people permission to kind of defy what the norm is.
What I'll add to this is I find that a lot of the controversy around women's health doesn't always come from the platforms or the media or the professionals. It's coming from the population. People, some women, a lot of men, don't want to hear about this. And they're very vocal when they hear things about, in my example, menopause and menopausal symptoms. There was a big backlash saying, I don't want to be hearing about this. Like, don't run this. Don't ruin my football game. And the client that I work with, Stellis Pharma, ran the first dedicated women's health ad in the Super Bowl. And on the one hand, we got a lot of impressions, we got a lot of reaction on a positive sense, but we also got a lot of reaction in a negative sense, saying that it didn't belong here. You got sexism, but you also had some ageism. Good you ran the commercial at the beginning of the game, because by halftime, your audience would be asleep. So hearing that kind of stuff in social really leads you down this path of saying, you're finding these cultural biases that are definitely present and people are acting on, but you can't stop because of that. You have to continue to get the message forward, to have a healthier population with less lifestyle, adversities because of a naturally occurring condition that if you're lucky enough to get older as a woman, you're going to reach menopause, and that should be a goal, and it should be something that we're happy about, not shying away from, and just seeing what's out there, just kind of stimulates us to keep it going. Get the content out there, get ads out there, continue to stoke that conversation.
I love that you both have really put a spotlight on this idea that there will be backlash, because sometimes brands have this feeling that if there's criticism, if there's bad feedback, like it's a failure of the brief or it's a failure of the execution. And in this conversation, it's almost inevitable. What's the internal calculus of how you weigh the risk of the message that you're putting out there and the backlash that it might elicit against what it needs to do, the conversation it needs to drive, the outcomes that you want to produce? How do you balance those scales in your head?
Well, part of it is, you pay attention to it. You definitely need to be aware of the conversations that are going on, but don't let those conversations stop you. Because I think Alex said it, people are not necessarily going to like everything you do, and that's okay. But the larger goal is to continue the conversation. So I think it's really, you can't shy away from it. Every ad is going to have some level of backlash if it's something that people are not used to seeing or hearing.
I think it's a really fair question, because I think, how many ads are we seeing where someone, and forgive me if you created one of these, but jumps off a dock and says, go talk to your doctor. Mm-hmm. I've never seen so many people swim in lakes in my entire life. I didn't start my advertising career in pharmaceutical marketing, but I don't know why so many people in pharmaceutical marketing swim in lakes. I really don't. So I asked an influencer about the ad we were gonna run for that company, and she said it's a horrible idea, terrible, it's gonna fail, you're gonna fail, you need to pay me to come up with a better ad. And I was like, what, how do I get out of this meeting? And I think, and there were a lot of people who said, this is a terrible idea. And I think one of the things that I try to have on my team, and we talk a lot about, is growth mindset. And it's something that you see, we talked a little bit about tech, right, with Pfizer. I think pharma needs to stop benchmarking with pharma. I think, can we just stop that today in this meeting? How do we feel about that? Because if we're benchmarking against ourselves, it's a low bar. I don't know if I want to do that for a living, no offense. Let's benchmark to Google. Let's benchmark to Apple. When we launched a brand on the Biosimilars team, we actually looked at Airbnb, that changed how we travel. We looked at Netflix, which changed how we watch content. And we looked at Amazon, whether you like it or not, changed how we shop. And those were the benchmarks for our brand launch. Biosimilar, by the way, where everybody's like, cost and access, cost and access. And we decided to go and look at Airbnb, Netflix, and so I think that's how you break through that inertia, is you actually break out of the category And so I spent a lot of time talking about working on Verizon. And then when I worked on AT&T, I don't spend much time talking about when I launched this drug or that drug or the other drug. Because I think we spend a lot of money on market research, and a lot of times there are women, like the one who I talked to, who says, you are going to fail. I am telling you right now, you're gonna fail. And if I listen to every single one of those people as a marketer, I probably shouldn't have a job right now. I mean, that's how strongly I feel about it. And I think that's why you have to trust your instincts, you have to trust the research, you have to trust the insights, quite frankly, about the person you're really trying to motivate to change and to act.
So there is a concrete element, and Jan, you kind of hit on this at the beginning, of there are segments that, through politicization or whatever it may be, are less receptive to some of these messages, creative positions, the type of content. From an audience strategy standpoint, is that a consideration? Is there anything you're doing with that within your campaign work, or how are you managing that?
I could go. Yeah, I mean, segmentation is critically important because different women, look, just because a woman is a woman doesn't make her like another woman. Women come in different shapes and sizes. They come in different races. They come with different cultural biases. They come with different political opinions. They come with different, appetites for, education, proactivity with their doctors. It's really important that we understand the different segments and speak to them in the ways that they will be most receptive. And guess what? Not every woman is going to be receptive to every message, even if it's about women's health. It's just, we're just not that way. We're not one cut from the same cloth population because of our gender. So the smarter we get, and shout out to AI Shot, everyone, that helps us get smarter quicker and understand who's doing what. We talk a lot about next best action on the HCP side, but there's also the idea of next best action on the patient side. Like if I give someone a certain message, what is the next best thing that they can do? And for some, it's a long road of research and re-research and convincing and waiting. Others, the next best action is, I'm gonna call my doctor today. This is hitting me at the right time, right place. So I think, it's a rich area. It's part of what, at least for me, keeps me interested and motivated and curious and learning and adopting. And, so thank you for that question, because I think that, treating women as different people is possibly the best thing that we can do to end up with a healthier population and better business results for our clients.
Anything to add, Alex?
I think you kind of stole it. I mean, you rocked it. And I think working with a good agency, PHM is our agency, and working with the right agency partners, I think not going at it alone. Coming from the agency side, you guys work on everything. I live and breathe biosimilars for the last 3 years, so I don't know what's going on with the menopause brand and so I think using your partners, using all of the people that are here today, all the wonderful meetings I've had, all the presentations, that's kind of the other part of it, is that there are no rules. Yes, there's rules, and I work very closely with my medical, legal, regulatory compliance colleagues, but there's aptitude to advance. And I think finding the right partners who are willing to kind of help you and learning from each other. And I talked to Jorge after the meeting. I said, how did you do that? What did you do? And how can I do that? And Dana and I have been talking, right? And I think that's the other thing, is to not be so siloed and say, I just do this one thing. I need to do it kind of how I do it. Having friends. Friends help. Phone a friend, like How to Be a Millionaire.
Absolutely.
Friends to do shots with.
Yeah, exactly.
So last question as we round out. Are you seeing bellwethers right now that the conversation is meaningfully shifting in the right direction? And what are those important pressure points to continue affecting change?
Can I go first? Obviously, the government is taking shots at women right now. I read that they're being fired from the military. I think that was the last headline I read. So I'm not going to pretend that we're living in a society right now that's being pretty harsh on gender, and I think we can let that happen, or we can kind of work within this sort of confines and actually find ways to have constructive conversations. And so whether that's with your policy, we have a policy team, obviously, and they're in Washington, and they're very, very busy right now. But finding kind of common ground, I think you said it best, Chan. Why are we politicizing healthcare? I don't really understand that. But it's also a business in this country, and whether you want to acknowledge that or not is up to you. And so I think we need to kind of find common ground where you can kind of see it from the other person's viewpoint and say, okay, well, let's think about this. If women are not well, how does that affect the economy, right? I think there's ways to kind of find avenues to make it a bigger issue that's not just women's health because it's a good thing to care about, but actually women make up 50% of the economy. The Army is going to have a really hard time recruiting if we don't have any women leaders, right? So I think that's an analog to women's health, but I do think those are the kind of opportunities we have, and to work within the constraints of the government, because that's the country we live in right now, but sort of find inroads where you can find bipartisan agreement and say, let's just take it down from us versus them.
I'll throw a little more positive spin on it just from the marketing.
Sorry.
No.
That was dark.
No, and you know
Whoops.
what? It may be dark, but it's true, and I'm not discounting anything you said because I agree with you 100%. I just trying to end a little bit positive
Yes,
note in terms
thank
of
you,
the future of women's health care. I don't want to talk about the political, but in terms of women's health care in marketing, I'm seeing, you talk about bellwethers or, signals that things are changing. I mean, I'm going to do a shout out to a campaign that I don't work on, and I'm just saying this as an individual, but the Novartis Your Attention Please campaign that was in this year's Super Bowl, I thought was absolutely incredible in terms of the way it approached women's breast health. And very in your face and very, I'm sure some people didn't like it. I'm sure some people said, like, I don't want my kids, my kids are in the room, I don't want to see this. But I think it is a definite indication of this larger embracing of a cultural conversation on the biggest stage to talk about something that is really, really important in a smart, provocative and inspiring way. So seeing things like that continuing to happen, seeing, like Tim, what WISP is doing, seeing, and like companies like that, seeing the focus in the pharma world on women's health and advancing the conversation makes me feel more positive, but we do have a long way to go, and we definitely have some headwinds, unfortunately. So, yeah.
But we'll get through it together.
All right, well, thank you both. At this point, we'll turn it over to the crowd for the questions that you have. Over there, John.
Fantastic presentation. I'm glad we're talking about this. My question is, what can we do as marketers or as partners to PHM to help with this problem? Any recommendations? Matthew Van Ernest from OpenX.
No, appreciate the question. I'll speak to, just continue to have the conversations, do the research, help us with new ideas, innovations. If all of you partners here and, clearly, companies who are supporting the clients and agencies that are doing the work, take women's health to heart and to boobs and vagina and everything else, all our other body parts, but think about women's health as a really important go forward initiative and come to us with your ideas and innovations. We're always open to something new. We're always open to testing and learning. So as our partners, in the room and anybody who might be watching on a live stream, please, continue to think about this and, help us, prove concepts.
Matthew, I'll just add really quickly. It's a great question. I ask all vendors as well as our media agencies and our AORs, please bring us insights from outside of pharma. Because Dove, there's so many great brands. Procter & Gamble are doing a lot of things. There's so much going on for women right now. And athletes, there's just so much going on. The I don't watch basketball. Thank you. But yeah, I would like you guys to continue to look outside of the industry and bring those insights to us, because we don't have the time, quite frankly. We have to just do all these other things. And so I look for you guys to really help bring those insights to us so that we can actually bring them into the sphere of healthcare, which is the most intimate form of connecting with someone, is their health.
We got one more here. Wonderful panel. Thank you so much, Tim Ragland, WISP. I'm not interjecting myself into the panel, but I think addressing that question is like fierce advocation with advertising partners. Like pointing out disparities between male and female healthcare has been actually really powerful for us. Shout out to the ladies of Pinterest over there. We've unlocked categories because we won't shut up. Candidly, and TikTok, we just unlocked being able to advertise herpes care, like stigmatized conditions before. It just takes a lot of shouting and yelling about it. So kudos to you both. One more and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Dana from Endo. Thank you both. A great discussion. I would agree with what you just said in terms of unlocking places where you may not be able to get the message out previously. We've experienced that on men's health as well. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask a little bit of a perhaps self-serving question. But I think there is an immense opportunity to all ships rise. And in men's health, while we may have, and I work on a brand that specifically is for sexual health, men's sexual health, and there's still tons of stigma. I could be up there talking about the same thing in a different lens, change the prism, different birth, sex, and you're talking about some similar stigmatization and fear, embarrassment, shame, not want to talk about things. I think there's an opportunity as healthcare marketers to help within the healthcare ecosystem to support each other in a synergistic and symbiotic way. And I'm going to throw something out there, and I'd love your reaction to it. But why couldn't a gynecologist and a urologist partner up and help men and women with their sexual health?
I think the number one issue with the health, I live with a clinician, is time. They don't have time. And so I think that is a fantastic idea. Look at you, think tank over there. I think the opportunity we have as marketers is to ask them what we can do to help with the time conundrum, because they just don't, what they got into the field for is not what they're doing. They're doing prior authorizations. I talked to a rheumatologist, he does them on Saturdays. That's crazy, right? So I think, to answer your question, I think bringing them together, I think, is one way we could do it. And we're trying to do that at Organon. We're thinking about that, women's health, biosimilars, right? How can we do it? But I think you have a fantastic idea, and you should talk to WISP about it. See what I did there? Back to you.
No, Dana, I think that's also a fantastic idea. Yeah.
Investment can be limited, right, for an individual brand.
Mm-hmm.
But if you create a coalition and you raise a voice around women's health and men's health in collaboration, we could have a much bigger voice.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it could be really an interesting use of KOLs on both sides who can partner together and become like a team. And I think there's lots to think about there.
All right, Jan, Alex, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.